Welcome to Transforming with Drew, where we talk about all things transgender from F to M to M to Fs and how to change your life for the better. What does it mean to be transgender for some people? It could mean being an advocate for transgender rights. It could mean living stealth. It could mean understanding and knowing everything there is about being trans. Well, it's not always so simple. I will tell you though, many of us, myself included, go through what's called a Trans Maddness period. Trans Maddness is where you finally learn to accept your transgender and you're like, okay, I accept this, I want to transition. There's a difference between knowing you're transgender and accepting you're transgender, because there is something called internal transphobia, which people do have, and some trans people have to work through that, and that's okay. It just takes time. Now, Trans Maddness sounds like a bad thing, and it can be for the wrong people, but it's not necessarily completely horrible. When I first decided to start transitioning, everything became transgender. I was so obsessed with seeing all the stuff transgender. I was seeing more transgender advocates. I was looking into more transgender rights. It didn't help around the time that they were taking away transgender rights either, and it was just constant trans, and I was driving my wife nuts. She's like, I miss Drew. I miss my partner. And she had every right to say that, because I got so caught up in everything that was transgender that I was starting to lose who I originally am. And it's very common. I see in a lot of other support groups, spousal support groups and things of that nature, it's like, oh my god, everything's trans. They're looking at me wrong because I'm trans. They're talking to me wrong because I'm trans. I didn't get this because I'm trans. And it's very reason. It's called the spotlight effect. Now, I listen to a lot of other podcasters, and one of the podcasters I actually absolutely love is Rob Dial. He's a great motivational person. I've been listening to him for a while now, and I can really relate to his, get up off your butt and there's no excuses attitude. It's just the way it is, and it works for me. It doesn't work for everybody. That's okay. But he talks about the spotlight effect. Now, let's give the best example. Have you ever bought a car or bought a game or a certain clothing item, and then you see it everywhere? Well, it's because it's very close into your mind. So when you are thinking about the transition or transitioning, or what you've been going through with transitioning, everything that you're going through about transitioning, everything transgender is going to pop up. You're going to see clothing items. You're going to see people looking at you funny and thinking that it's because you're trans. It's because you're giving it all of that attention. Now, some people can get out of this and find their way back to themselves and realize, okay, I was just being paranoid, or I was just being overly cautious or protective, or, and then maybe there are times where people are looking at you and going, what the fuck? And that's their problem, not ours. Now, my wife and I had to have a conversation for her saying she missed me. That's understandable. And if you have a partner that is going through Trans Maddness and you miss them, talk to them gently. And be like, hey, look, I love you and I support you through this transition, and I want you to be the utmost best person that you can be. Just be honest. Be like, hey, but I miss you a little bit. I feel like everything is kind of just, bleeding blue, pink, and white right now. And I miss us. And that's okay. You can be with somebody who's transgender and love them regardless of whether or not they're a raw person or whether they're a more peaceful person. Myself, I went into the raw mode when I became accepting of my transness, and this is how I talk about it. So my words for how I validate myself as transness. But once I accepted it, I was like, rah, and then I was like, I've never been rah my entire life. There's nothing about me that's rah. I'm not an advocate person when it comes to like screaming and yelling and protesting in a hard way. I'm the person that gives back with love and compassion and wants to show people that we are who we are by just being myself. And I lost a little bit of that by being obsessed with my trans spotlight, my trans madness, as I call it. And sometimes that happens. And while, rah-rah is perfect for some things. That's how we get laws made. It's how things change. But it's not how everybody has to be. And that is okay. I never realized that my advocacy is more in support. I've been to a protest before. I've been to a few, actually, and I'm not the person that gets screaming and angry and obsessive. I'm actually the person that gets sad over all the violence. I'm the person that my heart weeps, and I want things to change. So I rather do it for what I call a legal, logical standpoint. It's not saying that advocates that are rah-rah are illogical, because they're not very logical. But I'm saying mostly of a legal standpoint. So if I can get things done legally without causing any bloodshed or harm to another human being, then I'm going to do it. And that's okay. It's the reason I started this podcast, which has been transforming into something different. It's been showing the other light of the world, and I've decided that instead of just showing only transgender stuff, like trans male, trans women, intersex, non-binary, trans, all that stuff, I decided to talk about the rest of the TQIA community. Transforming with Drew has transformed into something that's better. Probably means I need to make a new intro. Guess I'm gonna have to work on that. But there's not enough information on the rest of our LGBTQ community. I can find plenty of information on the L, the G, and even the B. And while the B is persecuted just as much as the T and the Q and the I and the A, there's still more information. But I've decided that I'm going to be as open as possible. And I'm going to talk to people and their experiences in their life. And maybe help the Alphabet Mafia grow and build as a community together. It would be wonderful. And yeah, there's bad people in every group. There are gay men that don't like trans women or trans men. There's lesbians that don't like trans women or trans men. There's lesbians and gays who don't like bisexuals. There's bisexuals who don't like trans people. There's trans people who don't like trans people. There's hate in every group, and that's not the point. The point is, I want to spread acceptance and love and humility throughout this podcast, and I want us to come together. And I think that we can do this. It's not hard. We just have to be open-minded with open hearts. And yes, sometimes I'm going to say things that's going to bother people. But that's because everybody thinks and feels differently, and that's okay. That's okay. It doesn't mean that I'm any less valid in the way I'm speaking or that they're any less valid in the way they're feeling. All I know is that I'm extremely grateful to get out of my trans madness and find my way back to who I really am. I've always been a loving, caring, and compassionate person. That's never going to change. I am transgender. That's not going to change. But I can tell you that I'm going to live with purpose and live my truth. Until next time. Thank you for listening to this podcast. Please remember to hit the subscribe button. If you found this information useful, please share it with your friends or family members. Have a wonderful day.